Here we have a question relating to swap contracts. We're given the borrowing rates for these two companies, company A and B, in two different markets. First, the market for fixed rate debt. Company A would have to pay 5.60%. Company B would pay 4.35% if they were to issue fixed rate bonds or straight bonds. That is, the bond would yield 5.6 for company A, 4.35 for company B. And by straight bonds, I mean the coupon payments are level. Or they could issue floating rate bonds, where the coupons would float according to LIBOR. LIBOR plus 160 basis points for company A, and LIBOR plus 75 basis points for company B. 75 basis points would be like 0.75%. And we want to design swap contracts that profit both of these companies. In part A, the companies will have, well, let's write this stuff down. The information we're given, we can see that company B has lower interest rates in both markets for fixed and floating rate debt. So why would they transact with company A? Well, it turns out, well, we'll see that in a moment. First, we would to see if there is a potential for a profitable swap contract between these two companies. First, we'd calculate the difference. How much of an advantage does company B have over company A in both markets? So in this market for fixed rate debt, company B is paying 1.25% or 125 basis points less than company A. In the market for floating rate debt, if they were issuing debt there, they would pay 0.85% or 85 basis points less there. They're not equal, and that tells you that yes, indeed, there is the potential for gain. We can design a swap contract that will gain both companies. We're looking at the amount of the profit or the amount of the gain that they share would be the difference between these two. Okay, so that's 125 basis points minus 85 basis point gives us a difference of 40 basis points, or 0.40%. So first, we look at these two numbers and we see where is the advantage the largest. Company B has an absolute advantage in both markets, but they have a larger advantage over here in the fixed rate market, a market for fixed rate debt. So that they have a comparative advantage in the market in issuing fixed rate debt, while company A actually has, because it's less of a premium, company A is paying less of a risk premium, has a comparative advantage in the market for floating rate debt. They're paying more, but not by as much. So what should happen is company A should go ahead and issue debt in the market where they have a comparative advantage, and that would be the floating rate market. So they're going to issue LIBOR plus 160. And by the way, the notional principal, you can pick any number you want for the notional principal of these contracts. Let's say they're both issuing $1 million bonds. The answer will come out the same regardless of the principal or the amount borrowed. Let's say they're both borrowing $1 million though, so it would be issuing floating rate debt of LIBOR plus 160. LIBOR, is floating interest rate, like it's the Eurodollar interest rate. And B is going to issue bonds in the market where they have a comparative advantage, which is a 4.35% fixed debt. Now, if the amount borrowed were, say, $1 million, that means they'd be paying $43,500 per year. And this, the floating rate debt, it varies. It would move with the interest rate. Okay, now on to the swap contract. Well, first we need to design a goal. That is, here it says we're going to save both companies 20 basis points. Okay, well, let's pick one. Let's say it's A. We want the net cash flow to end up being, for a 20 basis point saving. So it was, if they were to issue fixed rate debt on their own without the swap, they'd be paying 5.60%. If they saved 20 basis points, that'd be 5. They'd be paying 5, so it's negative because they're paying it, 5.40%. And we know that they're already paying, A is paying LIBOR, so they're paying LIBOR plus 160. basis points already. From the swap, the way the swap contracts work is they're going to end up, let me illustrate this for you here. Company A, I'm going to put over here, they're already paying, as we said, LIBOR plus 160 floating. Generally, swap contracts, one side, the floating, for fixed for floating swap contract, one side would just be LIBOR flat, because the LIBOR plus something is like a fixed something. 1.6% for a company is that's fixed for the life of the contract. And the other side is what we're looking for. The fixed payment is called the swap rate. And that's going to and from company B. Company A and company B, of course, would be being the two counterparties to the swap. And we know B is using their comparative advantage in issuing fixed rate 4.35% fixed. And this is floating. Oops. Alright, so basically we want to end up with, say, pick one, like I said, A is going to end up with a net 5.40. That's going to be equal to LIBOR plus 160 plus LIBOR they're receiving from the swap contract minus whatever they're paying to the swap contract. Well, it's minus whatever it takes to get to 5.4. That's basically our target here. They're paying LIBOR, they're receiving LIBOR, so the floating rate drops out. We're left with 160 basis points. 160 plus what? And they're paying 160 already, 1.6%. 1.6% plus what gives us 5.4, and that would be 540 minus 160 is 380, so 3.80%. So that's going to be our swap rate, 3.80%. So it's floating for fixed. That gets net A to 540. So the swap rate is going to be equal to 3.80%. That's really the key number that I'm looking for here in part A. 3.80% would be the swap rate, when we know the floating side is going to be LIBOR flat. So you just need to figure out what the fixed payment would be. So that is, B is paying LIBOR times 1 million, or times whatever the principal is, to A, and A is paying a fixed 3.8% of the principal to B. And so this part in the middle is a swap contract. These parts on the outside are not. Let's make, just as a double check, let's make sure that company B is also getting a 20 basis point gain. So company B is already paying 4.35%, right? And they're also paying to the swap contract LIBOR, so we'll subtract that as well. They're paying LIBOR minus because it's being paid. And they're receiving the 3.8% from A, so plus 3.80%. So we end up with a net obligation of minus LIBOR plus, well, what's 435 minus 380? We have, excuse me, that'd be LIBOR plus 55 basis points, or 0.55%. So that, and 55 indeed is 20 points less than they would have paid if they just issued floating rate debt in the first place. And remember, they're not issuing floating rate debt. B is issuing fixed rate debt at 4.35%. But when you combine that fixed payment of 435 along with the swap contract of paying out LIBOR and receiving 380, you end up with a net obligation of floating rate obligation of LIBOR plus 55 basis points. Now on to part B. This is A. Part B, we have both A and B are still going to use their comparative advantage. A is still going to be paying LIBOR plus 160 as they issue bonds on the bonds that they're issuing. It's not part of the swap contract. They're also receiving from the swap contract LIBOR flat, LIBOR plus 0, and from B. And company B is issuing where they have a comparative advantage, and that's at the 4.35 fixed. It's the same as before, but the swap rate is going to be different because in Part B it says design the swap contract that produces a net gain of 15 basis points per annum for company A and a net gain of 25 basis points for B. 15 plus 25 still adds up to 40, so this is doable. So first, let's go ahead and set a target as we did before. We want the net cash flow. Just pick company A. I could choose either company. The net cash flow for A is going to be a 15 basis point gain over what they would have had to pay. Remember, they would have had to pay 5.6. 5.6 minus 15 is 545. So our target is 5.45% for company A. And that's going to be equal. We know that A is already paying negative LIBOR plus 160, or 1.6%. And we know that they're going to receive LIBOR from the swap contract, and they're going to pay a fixed payment to the swap contract. And what fixed payment makes it so that their net will be 5.45. That is what's going from A to B. And well, they're already paying 1.6, so 1.6 plus what is 5.45? I believe that would be 385, so minus 3.85%. And that'll get us there. 385 plus 1.60 gives us 5.45%. So the swap rate is going to be 3.85%. Let's go ahead and double check. I'll write that in here, 3.85, and that's a fixed payment, whereas this top one is a floating payment. Okay. Let's go ahead and double check. So the swap rate with 3.85, let's make sure what is the net cash flow for from this, or the net obligation rather, for B. Yeah, it is a cash flow. But wait, on $1 million, 545 would be 54,500. So for company B, that's supposed to be a B. It's going to be well, they're paying 4.35% already from issuing straight debt. They're also paying LIBOR to the swap contract, so minus LIBOR. And they're receiving from the swap contract 385, so plus 385, 3.85%. And what's the net? Is, well, 435 minus 385 is, what is that? Okay, 435 minus 385 is 50. So we end up with a net obligation of LIBOR, that's supposed to be a minus sign, LIBOR plus 50 basis points for company B. Let's go ahead and check to see what they would have been paying if they'd issued floating rate debt. They would have been paying LIBOR plus 75 basis points. Now their net obligation is LIBOR plus 50 basis points. So that's a 25-point gain, which is what we're looking for. So 15-point gain for 15 basis points per year for company A, and 25 basis points per year gain for company B. Now on to part C. C wants to divvy it up three ways between company A and like an intermediary, which are usually called swap banks. They specialize in swap contracts. They're usually international banks. And company B over here. Again, B and A are going to use their comparative advantages. B is going to issue 4.35% fixed rate debt in the open market. A is going to go ahead and pay out their LIBOR plus 160 floating. Okay, and they're going to receive, just as before, LIBOR from their swap contract with the swap bank. And that's just being passed through. B is going to also pay LIBOR flat. And we need to find, there's going to be two swap contracts here, one between the swap bank and A, another between the swap bank and B. Both swap contracts are fixed for floating, LIBOR against some fixed payment. So how much we want to, let's see, the net cash flow for A is going to be, it says both companies are going to get 15 basis points per annum. Well, A was already getting 15 basis points, so this 5.45 won't change. That is, the net cash flow for A is going to be 5.45%. And they're going to, and that must be equal to what they're already paying LIBOR plus 160. They're receiving LIBOR from the swap contract they have with the swap bank, and they're going to be paying some fixed rate to the bank, and it's going to be the same number because you want to end up at 5.45, so that's 3.85 stays there, so minus 3.85% fixed. Okay, so they're paying 3.85% to the bank, and that's a fixed rate. Okay, and that's, how is that a 15 basis point gain again? Well, they would have, if they'd issued floating rate, if they'd issued they would have, I'm sorry, minus it. When you add that together, you get 5.45%. Oh, you already knew that. Okay, 5.4% again, that's better than what they would have been paying at 5.60%. So it's a 15-point gain over that. Now, company B is also supposed to get a 15 basis point gain from this, so net cash flow for B had better equal 15 basis points lower than they would have been paying otherwise. If they had issued floating rate debt on their own, they would have paid LIBOR plus 75. Minus 15 gives us LIBOR plus 60. So that must be equal to what B's already paying, 4.35 fixed, right? And they're paying LIBOR to the swap bank in their swap contract with the swap bank, so minus LIBOR. And they're going to receive whatever it takes to get to LIBOR plus 160. So, I'm sorry, receiving, not paying. They're receiving from the swap bank a fixed payment, which we don't know yet. But if you take 435 minus 60, you get what? 435 minus 60 gives us 573, so 3.75%. So it's going to be, they're going to receive 3.75% from that swap contract. So that's the swap rate on the second swap contract between the swap bank and company B. So company A has a swap contract with a swap rate of 3.85. Company B has a swap contract with 3.75. By the way, it would have been easier just to take out the question says the swap bank is going to get 10 basis points. So they're receiving 3.85. They're going to keep 0.10 or 10 basis points of that and pay out the other 3.75. You can see the difference, 3.85 and 3.75 is 10 basis points. So that they get 0.10% per year. Okay. And does this work out? Yes, indeed, I believe it does. That's equal to LIBOR plus 160. So again, in part C, the swap rates are 3.75 for the swap contract between the swap bank and B, and 3.85% fixed between the swap bank and company A.